Hello, and welcome to NEWMOA's Materials Management 101. What's the big deal about wasted food? Part 2.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the 9th installment of NEWMOA's Materials Management 101 for state staff. I'm John Fay, a project manager at NEWMOA, and I'll be the moderator today. This series is intended as a primer on solid waste management topics for staff that are new to their agency or would like to brush up on a particular subject. Recordings of past webinars and registration for upcoming ones are available on the NEWMOA website on the training tab of the Materials Management Program section. Today's webinar is on what's the big deal about wasted food? This is part 2, and we'll cover how states and partners have been implementing programs to prevent and divert more food waste in their states. In September, we held part 1, which covered why the EPA and states have prioritized prevention of food waste. The recording of that is also available on the training tab webpage. Before we get started, I'd like to review some housekeeping details. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and transcribed by Teams. Please keep your microphones on mute during the presentation. The presenters will take questions at the end. In the past, we've had some trouble with the Q&A feature, so we'll be taking the questions in the chat section. After the presentations, we can also open the microphones for questions with raised hands, that sort of thing. And today we have a fantastic slate of presenters for you. First, we have John Fisher, Deputy Division Director of Solid Waste at Mass DEP. Josh Enderle, a waste reduction consultant at CET in New York. Jay Hawkins, Director of Food Recovery Programs at Feeding New York State. And Justin Sandler, a partner at Black Earth Compost. Before we get started, I just want to bring up a note on terminology. As you might have noted, our title today uses the term wasted food. We are trying to move to using that term whenever we can because it's aligned with the EPA. And they must have spent hours deciding on using that term, so we'll go with that. We will also be using many other terms today, essentially interchangeably, even though they have slightly different meanings, including things like food waste, food scraps, surplus food, excess food, organics, and many others. Drop a question in the chat if you need clarification on any of those terms during the webinar. Well, we have limited time to get to many important topics in this hour, so without further ado, let's jump in with John Fisher. Let me get the slides going.
Great.
Thank
you, John.
Go. I hope everyone can see the slides at an appropriate size and everything.
I can see them, so I think I think we're good.
All right, great.
All right, I'll jump right in here because I know we're tight for time. So if you can just go to the next slide, please, John. So I'm going to be speaking about Massachusetts waste disposal ban on food material, and I will give you a little bit of guidance and information about how that ban works. I'll talk about. We have someone else speaking.
Sorry about that. I muted them all.
Okay. And I'll speak a little bit about the results we've seen to date, and then end on what we've seen from our perspective as some of the lessons learned. So to start, one of the things about the Massachusetts waste bans that is different than other state bans is that they are done via regulation under existing statutory authority. And we've had that statutory authority and we've used it for a long time, going back to 1990. And we have a lot of materials banned from disposal in Massachusetts through the years. And the one theme that I'll kind of highlight here and it runs through all of these waste bans, including our food waste disposal ban, is there's a need to balance supply and demand of markets for the material that we're banning. And what that means is that we use the waste bans to drive growth in infrastructure for that material, but we're also reliant on those markets and infrastructure to be able to move forward with the ban. So we have a little bit of a kind of inchworm dynamic where we try to move both of those elements together simultaneously, basically moving the supply and the demand forward together. And if we don't do that well, then the ban doesn't go so well. Next slide, please. So the way our waste bans work is we conduct inspections at solid waste facilities. This is also potentially different than how other states may do things under their bans. We're really only looking across all of our waste bans to enforce against businesses or institutions. And that's sort of obviously the case with the food waste ban because it's only food material from businesses and institutions that's banned. But this kind of holds true through all the materials that we're talking about. We're really not in the business of doing waste ban enforcement against individuals. The way our enforcement works, our first violation that we observe, we do what's called a notice of noncompliance. Does not carry a penalty, but does require a response from the recipient about how they're going to return to compliance. Then if we see a subsequent violation within a 5-year period, we go to what we consider higher level enforcement, typically takes the form of a consent order with a penalty, and our penalties per our enforcement guidance range between $860 to $1,000 per violation, though we have done larger penalties for multiple observed violations. And then I'm not going to get into this too much, but we also do send what we call formal request for information letters to businesses directly to verify their compliance with the waste ban. So that's another way that we attempt to try to get at compliance. So whether or not we're observing a load from those businesses at a solid waste facility, we still may send them a request for information if we believe they may be subject to the ban and if we're not sure what they're doing to comply. Next slide, please. Okay, so food waste, this was kind of the theme for the prior webinar. So I'm not going to speak a lot about this, but food waste, like we all know, it represents the largest single material category in our trash. And in Massachusetts, we have a goal to increase our diversion of food material from the trash or reduce food waste disposal by a total of 780,000 tons on an annual basis by 2030. That's a 500,000 ton per year increase over our 2018 baseline. And that's part of a larger overall solid waste master plan waste reduction goal. Next slide, please. Okay, so our food waste ban, we've progressed in 2 stages so far. So in 2014 was our initial waste ban. We developed that over a lengthy period of time. I'll talk more about that a little bit later. In Massachusetts, we believe this applies to roughly about 2,000 businesses, and those are businesses or institutions that dispose of 1 ton or more of food material per week. That went well. We made good progress. We reached what we thought was relatively good compliance among those businesses, and I'll show you more of those results in a moment. That led to the decision to proceed with a revised regulation that took effect in 2022, applied to roughly 2,000 more businesses that dispose of more than 1/2 ton per week of food material. One other important note to understand is to comply with the waste ban, you just have to be able to reduce your disposal below that threshold. You can still dispose of food material in the trash. You just can't dispose of that amount of food material in the trash per week. And you can comply through any combination of waste prevention, donation and food rescue, animal feed, composting, anaerobic digestion. You can use off-site facilities, you can use on-site systems. Any of those things can work to get you into compliance. We generally have not pushed or enforced a hierarchical approach to compliance, like the food waste, EPA food waste hierarchy, or now the EPA food scale. We do certainly support waste prevention and donation, and we support that through our technical assistance and education and outreach, but we don't mandate it, we don't require it in Massachusetts. Next slide, please. In addition to the waste ban, and really a core part of the waste ban, are some important supporting programs and policies. And there are a number, but I'm going to highlight just a few key ones here today. So one is our Recycling Works in Massachusetts program. We've had that program since 2011. So we launched the program prior to the 2014 ban. That provides free assistance to Massachusetts businesses and institutions on any kind of recycling, composting, waste reduction, waste prevention across all materials. For food material, they've provided assistance to more than 750 entities, or at least more than 750 cases of assistance. We also developed a new program along the way where they provide assistance to compost site operators to help improve their operations at their facilities or start a new facility that would compost food material. We've also supported the ban through grant and loan programs for business development. We have our recycling and reuse business development grants. We've given 17 grants for almost $2 million, and we're about to announce a significant new grant round for significant additional funding. It'll be our largest grant round yet, so we hope to have more to say about that very soon. And then we also deliver loans through our Recycling Loan Fund, and we're up to almost $5 million in loans for facilities that accept food material, which is typically either composting or anaerobic digestion, but we can also support collection activities and other activities as well. Next slide, please. Okay. So I'm going to kind of shift into results here. So when we developed our 2014 waste ban, and we wrote our background document that accompanies every set of draft regulations that we develop, we estimated that our food waste ban would get us from about 100,000 tons a year. That was our estimated baseline diversion, to about 300,000 tons per year. And then when we did our 2022 ban, we estimated that about 100,000 additional tons per year of food material would be subject to that new ban. What we've seen, and I'm going to show more detail about this in a moment, but we've seen our food material being diverted from disposal increase from about 100,000 tons in 2012, that was our pre-ban baseline, to about 380,000 tons. Sorry, that should say 2023. I'll show more detail about that in a moment. We've inspected more than 45,000 loads of trash since 2014, and we have issued enforcement. So we've done 129 notices of noncompliance. That's that initial enforcement. And then 14 consent orders that have included a penalty. Next slide, please. And this is what I referenced earlier. Gosh, I'm sorry, I had a different version of this slide, and for some reason popped back to an old version. I'll get John, I'll get you the updated version of this later on. But,
okay, that could have been in my my transition of your slides too. So
yeah, this happened to me with another.
We'll improve it for when we post it.
Happened to me with another version of this. It's not an earth-shaking difference. What's missing is the far right-hand column. 2023 shows a total of about 380,000 tons of diversion versus the 360,000 in 2022. So not a huge difference there. It doesn't really change the trend that we're showing, but we do just have that one more year of data. There you go. Highlighted there at the bottom by John. Thank you, John. So just two trends that I'm going to mention here. One is the growth we've seen is in anaerobic digestion, and we've actually seen a drop-off in the amount of food material being composted. Perfectly happy with the growth in anaerobic digestion, but we definitely like to invest more in our composting infrastructure and get that growing more going forward. And I'll talk more about that in a moment, about some of our kind of next steps and what we're turning to next. But, you can see a steady growth through the years, which we're really encouraged about. And of course, given our ambitious goal for 2030, we still have a lot of work to do to get from this number up to 780,000 tons by 2030. So good progress, but a lot more work to do. Next slide, please. Another metric that we've been tracking, and this is actually gathered for us by our Recycling Works in Massachusetts program. And this shows the number of businesses and institutions contracting for organics hauling. That organics hauling in the title. This is kind of a version of the point that John made in his intro. This is food material in particular that's being collected and from these businesses. So you can see our baseline when we were rolling out the first ban, about 1,350 businesses getting food waste collection. And that's more than doubled through the years. And we're up north of 3,000 businesses that are getting separate food waste collection from haulers. So that's great. We have seen that plateau a little bit in the last couple of years. So we want to see that we want to see another uptick in this curve over the next couple of years, but really great progress to date. And we're really excited about the number of businesses that are running these programs in Massachusetts. Next slide, please. Okay, capacity. So we feel good about our capacity as of now. We have we estimate about 500,000 tons per year of capacity for food materials, somewhat elastic capacity in terms of how these facilities are permitted, but we believe that's roughly our operational capacity that's available. So we have a little bit of excess capacity right now, but going forward, we're going to need more. We in 2016 we contracted for an economic impact study that showed really positive economic benefits from the initial implementation of the 2014 ban. We're actually going to be doing that again in 2025. So we're interested to see what that update looks like after a number of more years of implementing the waste ban. Our capacity is increasingly part of a regional capacity picture, which I think is a great thing. That's a function of all of the Northeast states that are implementing food waste bans, and I think that capacity is mutually reinforcing. So I think that's a really positive trend across the region. Within Massachusetts, we feel we will need more distributed capacity and more expanded collection infrastructure. So as we move forward, we'll be focusing our efforts to divert food material from disposal on smaller generators, small businesses, and residents. And we believe that's going to, in order to make that more cost effective or as cost effective as possible, going to require really distributed capacity to reduce transportation and collection distances. So we will need more capacity going forward, and we think it's going to need to be distributed a little bit differently and probably a little more in the eastern third of the state than it is right now. So good capacity picture now, but we'll need to continue to evolve as we go. Almost done here. Next slide, please, John. Okay, so this is kind of my concluding slide, and I'll just leave a slide of links and resources at the end here. So some of the things that I think were really important about our waste ban, and as I mentioned, our ban via regulation is a little bit different than other state bans. But one thing is, before we even started developing the ban, we've been working on this for more than a decade. We had a really great partnership with our Massachusetts Food Association. We were able to demonstrate that at the right scale, especially at the 1 ton or more per week, that businesses could actually save money on separating and diverting food material from disposal. That was really important in the political rollout of the 2014 ban. We did engage in extensive stakeholder engagement before, during, and after the ban, and that's something we continue to strive to do. We did do a soft launch in the first year or so, really focused outreach and compliance assistance and not on enforcement initially. But now we're very much in enforcement mode, complemented by technical assistance through our Recycling Works program. And we continue to provide support through market development funding. As I mentioned, we don't feel that we're done with our infrastructure for food material. We need more. And so we're continuing to invest in that. And we're also continuing to invest in the infrastructure for donation and rescue. More of our grants are going into the donation and rescue collection infrastructure. I think that's an important element of our strategy as well. And then that's basically all I got. One more slide here, which is just my links to share, some of the critical links to go for more information about our food waste ban in Massachusetts. And I will wrap it up there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, John. Excellent overview of the arc of implementing the ban and getting more diverted in Massachusetts. Next up, we have Josh Enderly from CET.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Glad to have you.
Yeah, good to be here. I'm Josh from Waste Reduction Consultant from CET. Mentioned before, I'm based in Binghamton, New York, working on our New York State program. But a little bit of background about CET. We're an environmental nonprofit that's been helping people and businesses save energy and reduce waste for about 45 years. So our team altogether has decades of experience. And we have a couple main buckets that we work in is our residential and energy efficiency with commercial buildings, as well as our wasted food solutions programs. That's like administered statewide. One of the programs being in Massachusetts with the Recycling Works program. Partnerships are crucial. Next slide, please. For our impact, so a lot of our partners are listed here. So like thanks to the EPA and USDA for helping make our Northeast work possible. And it's really a truly collaborative effort. Like none of us are as smart as all of us. Or another thing that I like to say is if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. So next slide, please. As I said before, we're working with statewide programs. So pictured here is a map of all the states that we've worked on, both in the Northeast and across the country. And listed here is the impact since we've had since 2013 in our efforts. So we started with the Recycling Works program, Mass DEP. For New York, it's the Rethink Food Waste New York program funded by the DEC. And we have similar contracts in other states too. So like Connecticut DEEP, Rhode Island DEM, and we provide similar assistance that I'll be talking about in our slides coming up here. And we've also partnered directly and indirectly with New Jersey DEP, New Hampshire DES, and Maine DEP. Other work that we've done is including Denver, Charlottesville, Virginia, Seattle, Portland, Oregon, and some spots in Ohio. So while I'll be focusing on New York, just know that we work on a national scale in several states. So next slide, please. For New York specifically, it's no different than the rest of the nation or the globe really as far as food waste goes. About 40% of all food produced in the U.S. intended for consumption, is not eaten. In New York, there's about 2.2 million New Yorkers that are food insecure. So we want to be one of those matchmakers that can help solve the food waste crisis, where we can donate edible food to those in need and recycle the nutrients left in inedible food and put that back into the soil. So next slide, please. So effective January 1st, 2022, New York State Food Donation and Food Scraps Recycling Law went into effect, which requires businesses and institutions that generate an average of 2 tons of wasted food per week or more to donate as much as possible and to recycle all that's remaining if they're within 25 miles of an organics recycler, so like a compost facility or an anaerobic digester. So that impact is a pretty big impact. Let's see, in 2022, that was 20,000 tons of food donated and about 266,000 tons of food scraps recycled. So just through the designated food scraps generators, it's a huge, impact, but we also work with businesses of all sizes as well through our Rethink Food Waste New York program. So next slide, please. Through this program, we help identify and implement waste prevention and recovery strategies for the diversion of food scraps or wasted food. And our service is available at no cost to the businesses and institutions in New York. And as we go through, we help, identify opportunities for them to donate surplus food, develop a program to recover wasted food, and identify other ways that they could reduce waste as well beyond food scraps using some resources that we share with our different state programs, including Recycling Works, because we have such a robust knowledge base and a lot of resources from that program since we've been working on that one for a while. So next slide, please. Here's kind of a snapshot of our no-cost technical assistance. First step is to set up a waste reduction assessment. So either I or someone else in the state, or at least New York, will come in and help evaluate either in person or remotely, where we take a tour of your facility so we can report any identifying opportunities for food donation. We really want to do look at your trash cans and how waste is gone through the facility, where the dumpsters are, who's handling the scraps, and we're talking with the folks that are involved in the decision making too, because it takes a whole effort across all the scales of management on staff level, and we want to be there to support the implementation of waste food recovery. We're not a punitive organization by any means. We're here for the technical support. So while we go through with our clipboards and a lot of the kitchens think, oh, we're the health department, not necessarily, and that's not us. We're here to make the relationships. We're kind of like the matchmaker, right? We're here to help you plug into the different resources that you need. And the next slide just has some pictures of that. Us talking to stakeholders, talking to trash cans. Well, I mean, looking at trash cans, not talking to trash cans. But I mean, how people dispose their waste really tells a story, right? So we look at the infrastructure, how the bins are set up, how do they look, how do people interact with them? Because that really makes a difference in people's behavior and if it's going to support your efforts or not for reducing waste. Next slide, please. As we're going through creating the report, individualized report for all of our customers, we kind of follow the wasted food scale. So starting with source reduction first, mostly because it can usually be cost savings, usually one of the cheapest things that you can implement and reduce waste. So either tracking waste by hand, using a scale, seeing how much you can throw away every week, kind of categorize the type of waste that's produced either back of house or front of house. And that's led to some savings as well from our customers. So Apponaug Brewery in Rhode Island, when they were measuring the waste coming back from their plates, they noticed that they were throwing away 24 quarts of French fries. And so as a result from that, they reduced the portion sizes. And, when you reduce portion sizes, less waste means less wasted money as well. There's other softwares out there too that we can connect you with, really just providing you the resources to help you make the best decision for for our customers' implementation, whatever makes sense. It's really not a one size fits all, and because New York is such a large state, geographically, there's a lot of different opportunities, so we're there to help make it a little bit easier to connect. So next slide, please. And that's true for food donation guidance too. This is a picture of one of our signages that we can provide to really hone in and to depict what you're working with, within your facility. What are some common items that you're going to be donating, some excess food. We just want to make sure that it's clearly communicated with your staff and everyone that's going to be working with donated food, that we're on the same page. And one of the things that we like to share is that there's tax incentives, but there's also liability protections too. And so that can be kind of a misunderstanding with some folks, and we're here to say, no, there's resources there for you. You're protected for donating food. We want to make sure that food goes to its best use, and you're not going to get sued or anything like that. No one's going to be mad at you for donating good edible food in good faith too. So next slide for food scraps, source separation guidance. We definitely recommend working with our customers' haulers first to see if they have organics hauling services available. And if not, we can help them navigate the marketplace to find best fit for them. For a hauler, that will either take it to a composting facility or anaerobic digestion, or maybe even potentially to a farm that could use it as animal feed. With all those different avenues means that there's a varying degree of what's acceptable. So we work with the business to really hone in on what they want to either be disposing of and to help select the hauler, or go from the hauler to see what they can use for that. So what I mean is, if we're working with, a company that really wants to use compostable ware, we're going to be aware of that and then have them they can choose a vendor that will accept and compost and properly dispose of those compostables. But if they're going to be working with a farmer that's going to be doing animal feed, we're going to provide guidance and saying, no, you can only do these certain foods in this certain way. So really depending on the situation, we're there to make it make sense for you and your staff there. Next slide, please. This slide has a couple more signage that we have. I want to highlight that we can also offer translations as well as other customizations. So we can change the list of the items that are depicted in each of the signs, but we can also have the pictures change just to really tailor it to your specific needs to make it as clear as possible. Along with signage, we generally recommend color coding your trash as well, or just have some sort of system that makes sense for you. If you have something already in place, that's great. We can work with you as far as either the shapes or the colors, just to make sure that everyone's on board with what goes where. Proper sorting is essential for a successful program, especially for food scraps and for recycling. If you have contamination, it could be, your hauler may charge a fee for taking it, and it's just going to be a lower quality at the end of it. So we want to help save you the headache, and we can go in and create these signages for one, but also help implement staff training so everyone's on board at the same rate there. Next slide, please. Lastly, looking kind of more broadly of what we offer as far as free technical assistance, we have compost site technical assistance available. So if you're looking to do on-site composting, or if you're a farm, or if you are already composting and need some extra assistance, we're here for you. So we can help with site design layout, operational best practice management, pest control management, all sorts of those things. Our compost folks basically can come and help you implement and make sure you're working with the best management practices. Another thing that I would like to plug real quick is our operators training. And we have our last one of this series coming up in New York, in Winthrop, New York, on October 28th at Witten Family Farm. So this is really a hands-on opportunity to learn about composting. And it's free, it's at no cost, and you'll learn from one of our compost consultants for the whole day how to compost, best management practices for wasted food recycling. So that's a lot of information. Next slide here has some of our contact information for our program. So feel free to reach out either to there or to me directly. I'd love to answer any questions at the end of this.
Fantastic. Thank you, Josh. What great work that CET does in New York and in other states. It's such an important gap between what state staff can actually do and what needs to be done for the regulated community. So big kudos. And I noticed that even your signage there looked like it was harmonized with other states. So having CET actually cover several states helps people see the same signs in different places. So I thought that was a particularly nice aspect of your services. All right, but we still have a lot to go through. So next up, we have Jay Hawkins from Feeding New York State. So I assume you work with Josh and the other CET folks in New York State, kind of filling that very special part of getting the food to other people. So we'll go ahead to you, Jay.
Thanks, John. My name is Jay Hawkins. I am with Feeding New York State. I am the director of the food recovery programs, and we actually do work a lot with Josh and his team. We'll actually cover a little bit of that later in the webinar. Next slide. So we're going to talk about, just going to talk a little bit about what we do at Feeding New York State, because I'm assuming a lot of you don't know what we actually do. How did we get where we are with our food recovery program? Some of the outreach that we've done, and then how we can help. How we can help you guys. Next slide. So our mission at Feeding New York State is to lead a unified effort for a hunger-free New York State. So our pillars, as you can see to the right, are advocacy, food sourcing, and food recovery. So our advocacy team really focuses on priorities that are, helping our food insecure neighbors. Underneath advocacy, you can see that there was $4.5 million that we received under the Nourish New York program, and that'll go right back to our food banks. And then food sourcing. So a little different than food recovery. Food recovery is the program that I lead. Food sourcing at Feeding New York State is, we have a director of state produce and logistics. His name is Jim Germain. He works directly with our farmers throughout the state and a lot of the co-ops that are not only in New York State, but regionally based. And as you can see, last year, he sourced 33 million pounds last year. And that was fiscal year 24 for us. And then food recovery, the program that we created when the new law, the Food Donation and Food Recycling and Scraps law began. And this is for the last 3 years, we've sourced 32 million additional pounds. Our team at Feeding New York State has 10 employees that kind of spend their time kind of working on these 3 pillars. Next slide. So these are our member food banks. So a lot of times you'll hear their terminology, member food bank, pantries, soup kitchens. So the food banks are spread regionally throughout the state. And as you can see here, they're broken down by service areas. So all the way from Buffalo to New York City. Now we have 8 service areas because New York City and Long Island is a shared service area. So we have 2 food banks in Long Island and 2 in New York City. Now, with that being said, our 10 member food banks have 5,000 partner agencies. So throughout the state of New York, we have 5,000 partner agencies. And those are, like I mentioned before, food rescue organizations, pantries, soup kitchens, and we work a lot through them to get the work that we do done. Next slide. So what's a food bank? So I know a lot of you kind of think that, food banks, food pantries, kind of similar. So usually food banks serve multiple counties. Food pantries will serve, a single county. And a food bank has I say large. We have some that are 60,000 square feet. We have some that are a little bit bigger, but it's a warehouse where we have a lot of food that's coming in, and we can store a lot of commodities. And then we have a fleet of vehicles, usually larger tractor trailers, but sometimes they're smaller box trucks or vans. And we then have the means to get that food to the agencies so that they can get it to the communities that are in need. Next slide. So as I mentioned before, partner agencies are considered the food pantry or food rescue programs, and they distribute right to the communities that they're in. About 5,000 in New York State, and there are some that operate outside of our food bank network. So a lot of these 5,000 food programs in New York State they all operate with us, but there are a lot that operate outside of our network. Next slide. So how did we get here? So in the US, about 38% of all our food goes unsold or uneaten. And I know we mentioned that. We mentioned 40%. So we call this surplus food. And, when you look at the graph at the side, you see about 235 million tons of food in the US. And then it's 77.6 million tons of actual food waste. And that's about 145 billion meals worth of food. So another fact that's important for us is there's 18 billion pounds of produce produced on New York State farms, and over 1 billion pounds of that never actually leave the farms, right? So we know there's a lot of work to do in New York State, and we continue to do that with this program. Next. So you guys are probably all pretty familiar with this, the wasted food hierarchy. So, reduction obviously is, the most preferred, and then donation. And that's what we're going to spend a few more minutes talking about today. We could spend all day talking about reduction because a lot of generators are really doing a good job with the reduction piece. But as far as donation goes, we're going to spend some time talking about that. Under the New York State food donation law, there's about 1,200 large food generators that are eligible and that need to donate edible food, and some of them also have to recycle as well. Next slide. So the food recovery program. So our program started back in 2022. And I know Josh mentioned this as well, but it started right in January when the New York State food donation and food scraps recycling law started up. Once again, I know I mentioned it before, but eligible organizations must donate excess edible food, and then the ones that are designated to recycle the remaining food scraps must do so if they're located within 25 miles of an organics recycler. So our goals right now are to source 37 million pounds by the end of June 2025, and then just continue to divert the additional pounds away from landfills. Next slide. So some of the outreach that we do. So those 1,200 generators that I just mentioned all receive a letter from the New York State DEC. And so we also, to follow up on that, sent them flyers, postcards, just kind of saying, hey, we're here to support you. We offer this free technical service. We've also done a lot of social media videos, just kind of with our generators in New York State, grocery chains, larger retailers, just videos talking to them and having them reiterate to the folks why they support the law, and that there's really a low risk involved, that there's never been a lawsuit in New York State, and that there's the Bill Emerson Act, and there's a lot of things that protect you when you're donating in good faith, and and it's the right thing to do, right? So we also created agency training videos. So our partner agencies, those food programs, the pantries, we created training videos so that they know how to do safe pickups from these generators. So when they're going in and they got a donation from a grocery store, they have all the tools that they need, and they get the food safety training for free from our food banks, as well as all the equipment they need to do the food bank to do the pickup from the generators. Each food bank has their own sourcing team, so really we just partner them with the generators. It makes it really easy, and we also provide the DC New York State DC guidance document to every business that we visit that's part of the donation program. Next slide. So how can we help? So generally what we're doing now is, if there's a generator that's on, that has to donate, that's on the list, the designated food scrap generator list, I'll go and I'll do a visit with the food bank to that generator. A lot of times we don't call ahead just because, sometimes it's hard to get a hold of somebody, but we'll go into the generator and we'll do an initial visit with the food bank and talk to the management team just to see if they're willing to participate in the program, if they received the letter from the DEC, if they received our postcard, and then talk to them about what a program would look like, what a routine schedule would look like, how we can conduct in-person trainings, we can, and generally we'll do monthly visits or every few months. And then the reporting aspect is important too, because, at the end of the year, the businesses that have to donate under the law also have to report what they actually donated. So we keep track of that through an app, and each agency reports every week or month to the food bank on what they actually picked up as far as donation goes from each generator. And then I'll get the report from the food bank so that I can share it with the generator, or the food bank can share it with the generator. So every month they have a report and they can keep track. And then once again, it's always good to have a direct point of contact for a program like this, and we also give them that as well. So this is
Jay, let's these graphs are really self-explanatory, and we got to save some time for Black Earth here. So let's pop through these quick.
Yeah, let's pop through them quick. Sorry, John. So these are just the pounds that we recovered by quarter, guys. Just starting from Q2 22 through where we are today. So we're at about 32 million pounds total. John, you can go to the next slide. As you can see there, 32 million pounds total donated through August of 2024. And we have 663 generators currently donating. And once again, like he said, pretty straightforward. We talked about a lot of this already. Most important part of this is we provide the food safety training and the equipment they need to do these pickups appropriately. And then if you need to contact us, this is our call center. My email is right here. We have our website, and then if you need to reach out to us, there's also social media where you can see some of the videos that I talked about.
Terrific.
Thanks, John.
Great. Thank you, Jay. That doing amazing work there. Those numbers are getting big. All right. Next up, we have Justin from Black Earth Compost, based out of Eastern Massachusetts. All right,
Thanks,
Justin.
John. What do we have, about 8 minutes or so, you say?
Yeah.
Okay. Justin Sandler, one of the owners of Black Earth Compost, and I guess just to keep the language consistent, that I guess should say increasing wasted food diversion, but we'll update that for next time. Next slide, please. So the presenters before, John Fisher at DP, setting the structure of some of the providing resources to and information for how folks can divert this material. And then Black Earth, we're going to talk about execution of how we do it. And so I've been with the company since 2011. It was just my friend Connor in a truck, and we went from shovels up to front end loaders, and the trucks got bigger and more of them as well. So now we have 40 trucks. We're doing about 350 tons per week. So we're a trucking company, but we're also a processor as well. And that gives us a number of advantages. We can keep a better eye on the feedstock, because if we're dumping at our own sites, we want to make sure it's low in contamination and only accepting the proper material in order to make a high-end product to sell in the form of compost and a couple other products in the end. So that's a picture of us in front of the first couple bags of compost that we hand bagged back at our friend's farm, Mahaffey Farm in Rowley. And that is scaled in its own way as well. And the way that Massachusetts has been rolling it out over a significant period of time, a slower rollout, starting with higher volume producers and cutting that threshold over time, has allowed our company to figure out how to grow slowly and properly and to scale up accordingly. If let's say a statewide mandate happened overnight, we wouldn't be able to afford the number of trucks. We'd be in a hiring frenzy, and we think we'd be taking in a lot more contamination too, because you'd be forcing people into a new habit that they're not quite ready for. So currently we have 40,000 residents, none of whom have to compost, but they still choose to. We pick up from 800 customers over 125 towns in Mass and Rhode Island, trying to crack into New Hampshire, but it's a tough shell to crack as of now. And we get it from residents at about 10 pounds a week, small offices in Boston about the same size, and then up to big schools, universities. We also do events too, which is a great place to spread awareness. We pick up from the Newport Folk and Jazz Festival. Our bins are everywhere. There's people in t-shirts engaging the public, and you're right at the point of decision between the trash, recycling, or compost, and it's a great way to spread direct information to people actually using compostable plastics, which we do accept if they're certified, or food scrap. And this weekend we have the House Regatta people there, all that are going to be composting, whether they know it or not. And I hope that they put the right material in the right bin. Yeah, next slide, please. And I guess on that last slide, it showed our like distributed network of compost sites across the state, one in Groton, one in Manchester by the Sea, one in Framingham, one that we're developing on the South Shore. And we hope to expand the number of small footprint sites across the states. It'll lower the trucking distance of the organics to the compost site, but also lower the trucking distance from the compost to the end user, be it a farm or a backyard grower. So lower carbon footprint on both sides of the operation there. And so we'll start with the residential rollouts, and 40,000 folks. Many of those are private pay, direct sign up right with our company, right with through the Black Earth Compost website. And we level out at about 20% of folks in a town with no actual city incentives to sign up, still willing to pay the full price. But the way we tier our pricing is that the more people in a town that sign up, the lower the cost is, and we set out the thresholds. So there's kind of an incentive to get more people going, and it turns into this nice effect where there's peer pressure, for lack of a better term, to get your neighbors going. And sometimes we've pitted town to town to compete to who can hit the next threshold, and kind of make it a little more interactive that way. Hauling is all about density, so that the denser the route, the cheaper it will be, for our company, and then we pass that on to the customer, and people will sign up at the lower price. So there's ways that towns can get involved. John Fisher talked about some of the incentives for towns, be it payment for the bin to help them get over that initial cost. There's some rebates that some towns use. Maybe you'll get a kickback on your water bill if you show proof that you're composting. There's a lot of different creative ways that towns can really take advantage of it, of reducing the price for our service. Our price is already competitively priced, around probably an average of $3.25 per pickup. And you compare that to a lot of towns that pay as you throw. For example, I live in Gloucester, and a purple bag is $2.25 per bag. So you can offset some of the price there. If you're buying less of the purple bags, you can put it in our compost bin as well. Proof, which is a significant problem on trash day in Gloucester. You're not going to see as many bags getting torn open as you would if it was just in a conventional plastic trash bag. Next slide, please. So just a little bit more detail about how towns can roll out programs. The easiest way, it's honestly a bit of a layup for a town, is just to create a preferred vendor program. They basically vouch for whatever company they select. Hopefully it's Black Earth Compost, but there are some great companies out there. And that's really just a way to have a single direct resource that a town can just kick their residents out to and say, hey, check these guys out. This is their pricing. This is what they do. Get us on the website, and kind of channel people towards us. Level 2 is a pilot program where, for example, a town may raise funds to pay for X number of residential subscriptions, call it 500. So they'll send a notice out to the residents, hey, for the next 500 folks in town, if you sign up by this date, we'll pay for a year subscription. And that gets people into it at no cost, directly to them. And then at the time of the expiration of the pilot program, hopefully that habit is really instilled. It's tough to start composting and stop composting. It's really, but it takes a while to shift that culture. But a pilot program is a great way to do it, with no barrier to entry cost-wise for the resident. Citywide collection, we have a couple towns that do citywide. For example, Manchester by the Sea, where our flagship site is, has citywide composting available. It's dubbed free, but as we know, nothing is free. So it is baked into the taxes of the town. But despite the fact that everybody has access to the program, it still took us 5 years to get to 50% participation. So the question does frequently come up, why don't towns just go for citywide mandatory quick? It's like, well, if it's free and it still takes 5 years to get half of them to do it, I would think that a forced program, potentially could, it will increase the cost, and it potentially degrade the quality of material if you have people who aren't quite there yet habitually, getting them into it. So the slow growth, change of mindset, change of daily habit.
Oh,
Tight
I've
compost.
lost you. Oh, there you're back.
Sorry about that. I was just saying, if we force change fast overnight, it's going to raise the cost, but it's also going to degrade the quality of the material potentially. And that's pretty key for us to keep everything contamination low. Next slide, please.
All right, and we have just another minute if we can get to the main points, and then we'll take a couple questions.
Happily cruise through these. Just a couple other options to get folks engaged. These are the Brookline bins on the bottom left. They're throughout the town, and people get an access code, and they can bring their compost to the location. Same example on the right there. Next slide, please. Commercial picks. So this is a commercial kitchen here in Gloucester at the Beauport Hotel. Just as an example of a location that does it, we market them to our residents. All the participating commercial places are highlighted in the residential accounts. Schools are great, instilling the habits in the next generation, and we have gardening programs to get the material back to the schools. Next slide. And these are just two pictures of our site, Manchester on the left, Groton on the right. And we work with towns, we use their land, we own the infrastructure, we process their brush, and we create a higher end compost versus a conventional yard waste compost. So there's benefits all around there. Not easy to build, but we handle the design and we've proven the model, and we're happy to show anybody around either of these sites. Next slide. And this is just showing the ultimate goal here is to get healthier food onto the plates of folks, and be it in that looks like Needham, where they bought 50 raised garden beds that we prefabricate, install, and get people growing with the material that we make. All right, next slide. All right, I think we made it.
All right. Great. Looks like, oh no, you froze again, Justin. One of my first questions was for you. Jody asked, how can you get participation without a law, especially in areas that have low landfill tipping fees and ample space? Well, here in the Northeast, we don't have that, but it's interesting that Black Earth does have a huge customer base without a law.
Yeah, I saw that question come up, and perhaps that's one of the reasons why New Hampshire has been tricky to get into, is because trash is a lot cheaper up there. Rhode Island and Massachusetts, we've had success in, but it's not only financial. That's not the only driver of this. There is just intrinsic value in composting, and it's a very community vibe that we've created. And you drive down the street in your neighborhood, and if you see half of your neighborhood with compost bins, that's its own advertising. It starts a conversation. This is why we do it. This is why we pay extra for it. And perhaps they can save a bit on their residential trash.
Yeah, great. We have another question. This is kind of both for Massachusetts and New York. And so what tons are you using? Are you using standard 2,000 pound tons in Massachusetts?
I just replied to that one. Yes.
Okay, great. I didn't. Oh yeah. Okay, great. And and it sounded to me like in Massachusetts, well, the question is, if you are generating 0.6 tons per week and Massachusetts level is a half a ton, if you donate to get that down below half a ton, are you no longer subject to the law? I mean, in New York, it looks like, Josh, one of your slides said that it actually, they do the math before donation. So maybe if each of you could take a moment to talk to each state.
Sure. So yeah, in Massachusetts, that scenario is basically correct because our law is based on how much goes for disposal in the trash. However, the caveat I'd say for that, whether it's a donation or a composting program, is once you set up that donation program or once you set up that compost program, it's really in your best interest to be as complete as possible. The more material you can get going to donation once you've set up the fixed cost of a program is to your advantage as well as for the social advantage that it provides. And typically the same thing's true with setting up a program for food waste, for composting or AD. Once you're paying that collection cost, it's in your interest to get as much diverted from the trash as possible.
Yeah,
And in New York.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. The way that they're identified is through like sort of a calculation based on either the size of the restaurants, number of meals that they provide. And so that's how the entities are identified. They can apply for waivers. If it is the case where they're donating and it brings them down the threshold, they can apply for a waiver for that. But I would also agree that, I mean, if you're already putting the work into setting up the programs, it's just great to keep them. You know, it's also like a promotional activity too, and that's something that we have worked with people in the past too, with our customers, is to provide spotlights to say, hey, we're doing this great work. We're taking the extra step to compost and we're donating. It's just a win-win overall.
Yeah, and that gets to kind of another part of the question is how does a food manufacturer or a restaurant know that they are generating that much to be covered by those laws? Is it like number of seats, number of meals? You just kind of go by that, or is it kind of just self-reporting? How do you find and identify folks in Massachusetts and in New York that are subject to the law?
So in Massachusetts, the ultimate compliance test is when we see a load of trash that has a significant amount of food waste from a company. That's how we know for a fact that we can actually base enforcement on. So that's a literal answer, is you'll know when you get a notice of noncompliance from us in the mail that you have more than a half ton of food waste. But beyond that, this is something that maybe Josh could speak to, but the Recycling Works program has a food waste estimation tool for Massachusetts, so it has sector-based estimates. So for your business sector, you can get an estimate about how much food waste you'd expect to generate. We do send, as I mentioned, request for information letters to certain businesses where we say, we believe based on the size of business and the sector you're in, you may be above the threshold. Can you share information with us about either what you're doing to divert food material from disposal, or how, if you think you're below the threshold, what's the basis for that? So that's kind of it gets to be a little bit more nuanced question, but that's my attempt at a short answer.
And I'll
Right.
say,
Anything to add, Josh?
yeah, similar tools. Well, if not, basically the Recycling Works. A lot of it's either Recycling Works tool and Pollution Prevention Institute, New York State. They use very similar numbers, if not the same in most cases for the sectors. So it's the same deal where you can kind of plug in the numbers, number of seats or meals, or size of the university or something like that. And it'll generate the number based on research numbers too, just like backed up, and they have like from EPA and other resources.
Great. Well, I'm sorry we can't get to any more questions because we are over time. But great thanks to all the presenters for your great insight and all that information. That was a lot in an hour. And for those of you who are on, please feel free to contact these folks with specific questions that you didn't get answered. They are all public servants ready to help. So without any, I guess that is it. So thank you all for coming, and this will be posted on the website by the end of the week for other people to see if they would like. So thank you all, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you.